Alright, so let's start off with an unboxing of the Nuu N30, a very cheap smartphone. You can see that it costs just $129, not on sale, $110 on sale. That's an incredibly cheap price for what you get. Excuse me. You do get here a 6.67-inch 720p display, 2 GHz octa-core CPU, triple cameras, or double cameras, sorry, 6 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of RAM, and 5,000 milliamp hours. Your network bands here on the Nuu N30 are slightly less than the B30, which is understandable because this is a cheaper smartphone. Anyway, let's unbox this and see what we got. All right, so here we have the cell phone itself. Gonna put that to one side and look at what else we have here. So here we have an 18-watt charger. We also have a USB-C cable as well as a pin popper over here. And in order to remove, and let's look at what else is inside the box. And on here we have an included case, some silica gel, some stickers, as well as a quick start guide, which we're not going to take a look at right now. We're just going to skip that. And let's take a look at the cell phone itself and go from there. All right, so peeling off the peel, very nice. All right, so this is a interesting phone. It's very light, very light phone. It does have a plastic back, and you can see that the back here, oh, it's going to attract a lot of fingerprints. I just peeled it off, and you can look at the dust over here. You can see the fingerprint grease already coming on. It is very light, so that's nice. The camera bump, you can see, is very large. So we have 5. I don't know which of these are cameras and which one's flashes. I'm assuming this is a flash, and then these are cameras. I don't know what this is, so I'm gonna have to test it out and find out. All right, so let's talk about the build quality of this thing. So again, very light. I can't tell if this is metal, is a metal band or not. However, you can see that on this side we have power buttons, a power button here with a built-in fingerprint sensor, volume buttons, and then on this side we have a SIM popper, and then on this side we have a speaker, and finally on the bottom here we have the USB-C, a speaker, as well as a headphone jack. Well, would you look at that? That is something that is rarer nowadays, and it's funny how a $130 phone or $110 on sale gets you that. All right, let's turn on this phone and see what we got. All right, so it's been a couple of days since the unboxing, and I'm here to talk to you about the various things about this smartphone. First, we're going to start with the screen. This thing has a 720p display. It does get plenty bright, so there's nothing to worry about there. And the colors here are not bad. I'm just going to play this for you, and then you can take a look for how it looks yourself and see if it does look nice or not. So in my opinion, this display here is quite good. Even though it's a 720p display, the color reproduction on this is quite passable, especially considering how cheap this phone is at about $110. It also has a 90 Hz refresh rate, which is not bad. I am quite satisfied with how the display looks, the colors that it produces, and the general quality of how the display looks as well. Maximum brightness on this display gets up to approximately 500 nits or thereabouts, so it gets up bright enough for most situations. You're not going to be able to see it in direct sunlight. And then if I put this all the way down to the lowest brightness, it gets low enough, but it's not super low. So it's still fairly easy to see if you are even in a bright environment, because as you can see, as I'm tilting it like that, I'm under studio lighting, and you can kind of see the like the video that's playing back very faintly. So it doesn't get super dark, but it does get bright enough. So the other thing to mention as well is the touchscreen. The touchscreen is passable, I would say. The touch sensitivity is not as much as I would like on more expensive smartphones, but it's good enough. But you can definitely tell the difference between this and a more expensive smartphone. Alright, next we're going to talk about the sound. You actually get stereo speakers, one over here and one over here as well. So you do get some pretty decent stereo separation. The only weird thing is that the speaker on the top is over here and the speaker at the bottom is down here. So it doesn't really affect you too much, but it's kind of strange to have them kind of offset on a diagonal over here. Quality wise, I'll let you listen to it and then we'll talk about the audio quality. Actually not bad. So the speaker quality here is actually quite decent for a $110 phone. There's not a lot of bass, which I never really expected in the first place. However, the crispness of the speaker is actually quite passable. It's quite decent. So I am quite impressed with the speaker quality here. So you won't be disappointed with the speaker on this phone. So in terms of battery life, I'm actually very pleased with the standby battery drain on this phone. I was getting somewhere along the lines of 3% battery drain overnight, which is quite impressive. And so I was able to leave the phone off the charger, not using it at all. So just testing the standby battery drain for approximately 2 to 3 days. And the battery life dropped by, I want to say 15%, which is actually very, very good considering that's a full 72 hours. So you will be able to get a full day of use out of this phone. Its battery life here is definitely not an issue and you should be able to get some pretty good battery life. Alright, so this phone comes with Android 14 and a Helio G81 processor. It is a low-end processor from MediaTek. In terms of snappiness, you can feel that the phone is slightly slower in terms of scrolling, for example, than another phone. Even though it has a 90Hz refresh rate, you can kind of feel a little bit of the lag. And where this starts really showing the limitations of the cheap chipset is how fast the apps launch. So you can see how long it takes for something to launch. And once you open too many apps, even though it has 6 GB of RAM, stuff actually just stops responding. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just going to keep opening apps until something crashes. And eventually, something will happen. So as I keep going, you'll see that the apps will continue and continue, and then eventually what will happen is that this thing will crash. So if I keep opening all the apps, it runs out of its 6 GB of RAM pretty quickly. And actually, you know what? This time it didn't do it, probably because I haven't watched anything. But let's do this, and I'm just going to turn the volume all the way down and just play a random video, and we should start seeing some crashes. Oh, no crashes. Okay, well, there we go. It was crashing for me quite a bit, so just be aware that the 6 GB of RAM and the slow chipset could be a limitation for you, but otherwise it should be good for most everyday tasks here. Alright, so if you are playing, you can actually play some pretty intense games like this. The only thing is that it does slow down pretty quickly, and you can't play it at very high resolution. Otherwise, you should be able to play games. You can even play games like Genshin Impact, and it will work pretty decently. You will play it at lower resolution, of course, and as well, you will also be having a lower frame rate because of the chip. So all of that is something that you'll have to be aware of when you buy this phone, especially if you want to play games. In terms of reception, this phone does support many of the North American bands. Not so sure about Europe, but you can check on the back of the box for the Nuu N30 to see what bands it supports and to see whether it works in your country. But as you can see, I'm getting data here. However, I turned off my data because I don't want to waste data. But as you can see, I'm also getting VoLTE as well. Alright, so talking about the camera on this device, so this camera here is not very good. I will say that if you are hoping to use this camera as your full-time camera, you're going to have to be aware of the compromises you are going to make with this, because if your lighting is anything less than ideal, you are going to have a really tough time using this camera in any sort of condition other than ideal lighting. So as you can see, whenever the lighting is bad, the camera just doesn't work very well, and it starts getting all grainy, and you can't really hear it or you can't really see it very well either, and it starts getting blurry, especially if you move your camera too fast. So it's stuff like that that really makes this camera not a very good camera. However, if you're giving it to an older family member, not a huge issue. They should be okay with it. Alright, so my thoughts on the Nuu N30. This is a very, very cheap phone. It's been a while since I've seen such a cheap phone, $110. I'll be honest, when I first started using this phone, I was kind of disappointed because it wasn't very fast. The touchscreen was a tiny bit not very sensitive, and the camera on the back, these cameras over here, they were not very good either. However, if you take all this into account and you actually consider the price that you're paying, this is actually a pretty good experience considering it works in many of the countries, right? You have a 6.7-inch 90Hz display, you've got an octa-core CPU, you've got 6 gigs of RAM, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and decent battery life for $110. That's actually pretty good. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.